In just 47 seconds, $3.6 million in redirected FBI funds. Kash Patel didn't expect the trap to backfire. He didn't expect Delia Ramirez to have the receipts. Cameras captured everything. The room held its breath. What did Ramirez reveal that made the FBI director's carefully planned ambush crumble into constitutional chaos? At exactly 2:07 p.m. on March 15, 2025, the House Judiciary Committee chamber buzzed with anticipation. FBI Director Kash Patel sat behind the witness table like a prosecutor who had never lost a case, his steel gray suit impeccable, his jaw set with the confidence of a man who'd spent months preparing for this moment. Stacks of classified files lay before him, each one a potential weapon in what he believed would be a systematic destruction of his critics. Across the mahogany expanse, Representative Delia Ramirez shuffled through her notes with deliberate calm. She wore a navy blazer over a white blouse, her expression unreadable, her dark eyes focused on the documents that would soon change everything. What Patel didn't know was that Ramirez had spent 3 sleepless nights with constitutional scholars, former FBI whistleblowers, and congressional budget analysts, preparing for exactly this confrontation. The trap Patel had set was elegant in its simplicity. For weeks, he'd been seeding rumors through friendly media outlets about Ramirez's alleged connections to immigration advocacy groups that had received federal grants. His plan was to turn her questions about FBI accountability into a defensive scramble about her own ethics. He'd done his homework, or so he thought. The gentle lady from Illinois is recognized for 5 minutes, Chairman Jim Jordan announced, his voice cutting through the chamber's tension. Ramirez looked up from her notes, her voice steady and measured. Thank you, Chairman. Director Patel, I want to start with a simple question about constitutional authority. Patel leaned forward slightly, his hands clasped on the table. This was his opening. Congresswoman, before we begin, I think the American people deserve to know about your organization's receipt of $2.3 million in federal grants from agencies you're now investigating. The chamber erupted in murmurs. Republican members nodded approvingly. Camera flashes illuminated Patel's satisfied expression. He'd thrown the first punch, and it had landed exactly where he'd intended. But Ramirez didn't flinch. Instead, she smiled. A calm, knowing smile that should have warned Patel that his trap was about to become his tomb. Director Patel, that's an interesting deflection, she said, her voice gaining strength. But since you raised the issue of federal grants and constitutional authority, let's talk about your use of emergency funds. Do you believe the FBI director has the authority to redirect congressional appropriations without explicit legislative approval? Patel's confident expression flickered. This wasn't going according to script. Congresswoman, we operate within all legal frameworks. That's not what I ask. Ramirez's interruption was surgical. It's a yes or no question. Do you have the authority to redirect funds appropriated by Congress without our explicit approval? We follow all applicable. Yes or no, Director? The silence stretched for exactly 4 seconds. Cameras zoomed in on Patel's face, catching the moment his jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. We have emergency authorities under certain circumstances. I see. Ramirez pulled out a thick folder. Let's discuss those circumstances. On February 3rd, you authorized the transfer of $3.6 million from the FBI's civil rights enforcement budget to expand surveillance operations, targeting immigrant advocacy groups. Were you aware that this transfer violated the Anti-Deficiency Act? Patel's hands moved to straighten his already perfect tie. Congresswoman, I'd need to review the specific. You don't need to review anything. Ramirez's voice cut through his evasion like a blade. I have the authorization memo right here, signed by you. Would you like me to read it to the committee? The color began to drain from Patel's face. His carefully prepared trap was becoming his nightmare. I stand by all decisions made in the interest of national security. National security. Ramirez's eyebrows rose. You transferred money from civil rights enforcement to surveillance of American citizens exercising their First Amendment rights. How exactly does that serve national security? Patel tried to regain control. Congresswoman, your own organization received. My organization? Ramirez leaned forward, her voice taking on an edge that made every person in the room pay attention. Director, are you referring to the Chicago Immigration Legal Defense Fund, a 501(c)(3) organization that provides constitutional due process representation to immigrants? Yes, that's the same organization that has won 47 cases against FBI overreach in federal court. Ramirez's smile was predatory now. The same organization whose legal challenges resulted in $8.7 million in settlements for unconstitutional surveillance operations. Patel's Adam's apple bobbed as he swallowed hard. Those cases are under appeal. Actually, they're not. Ramirez pulled out another document. The Department of Justice settled all 47 cases last week. Did you know that, Director? Or were you too busy planning your little ambush today to keep track of your own legal defeats? The chamber was dead silent now. Even the stenographer had stopped typing, mesmerized by the systematic destruction happening before their eyes. Furthermore, Ramirez continued, her voice building momentum, since you seem so interested in my supposed conflicts of interest, let me ask you about yours. Is it true that you've received $47,000 in speaking fees from the Heritage Foundation over the past 6 months? Patel's left eye twitched. Those were legitimate. The same Heritage Foundation that lobbied for the surveillance authorities you illegally expanded with redirected funds. Ramirez didn't wait for an answer. The same Heritage Foundation that drafted the memo you used to justify surveilling the very groups my organization represents. Sweat appeared on Patel's forehead. His trap had become a trap, and he was the one caught in it. Let me be crystal clear about something, Director, Ramirez said, her voice now carrying the full weight of constitutional authority. When I took my oath of office, I swore to support and defend the Constitution of the United States. Not the FBI, not any administration. The Constitution, and that Constitution gives Congress the power of the purse, which means you cannot redirect funds we appropriated without our permission. Patel tried one last desperate gambit. Congresswoman, in a post-9/11 world, don't. The word cracked like a whip. Don't you dare invoke 9/11 to justify constitutional violations. Don't you dare use national security as a shield for your personal vendettas against groups that dare to challenge your authority. Ramirez stood up, her small frame somehow commanding the entire chamber. You want to talk about accountability, Director? Let's talk about accountability. In 1,116 days, as FBI Director, you have violated the Anti-Deficiency Act 17 times. You have redirected $23.7 million in congressional appropriations without authorization. You have weaponized federal surveillance powers against American citizens. And when Congress tries to investigate, you attempt to smear the investigators. The cameras captured every word, every gesture, every bead of sweat forming on Patel's brow. You know what's truly dangerous to national security, Director? Ramirez's voice rose. It's not immigrant families seeking legal representation. It's not advocacy groups defending constitutional rights. It's FBI directors who think they're above the law, above Congress, above the Constitution itself. Patel opened his mouth to respond, but no sound came out. For the first time in his career, the man who had built his reputation on aggressive interrogation techniques was speechless. And since you seem so concerned about my organization's federal funding, Ramirez continued, let me remind you of something. Every penny we received was appropriated by Congress, authorized by law, and used exactly as intended, to provide constitutional due process to Americans and immigrants alike. Can you say the same about the $23.7 million you illegally redirected? Silence. 4 seconds. 8 seconds. 12 seconds.
I'll take your silence as a no, Ramirez said, settling back into her chair. Now, Director, let's talk about your resignation.
Because after 116 days of constitutional violations, abuse of power and attempts to intimidate Congress, it's clear you're not fit to hold this office. The trap Patel had set for 6 months, the ambush he'd prepared with military precision, the political assassination he'd orchestrated, all of it lay in ruins around him. Ramirez hadn't just avoided his snare, she'd turned it into a noose that was now tightening around his own neck. CNN would later call it the most devastating congressional questioning in modern history. Fox News would struggle to defend their favorite FBI director. MSNBC would play the footage on loop for days. Twitter would explode with Kash Patel trap, and Ramirez destroyed trending worldwide. But in that moment, in that chamber, there was only the sound of Kash Patel's career, ending in real time, destroyed not by partisan politics or media bias, but by a woman who knew the Constitution better than he knew his own ambitions. When Chairman Jordan finally called for a recess, Patel remained seated, staring at the wreckage of his carefully laid plans, wondering how the hunter had become the hunted in just 47 seconds of brutal constitutional truth. Sometimes the strongest weapon isn't surveillance power or political connections. It's knowledge, preparation, and an unshakable commitment to constitutional principles revealed at exactly the right moment. At exactly 2:54 p.m., as the committee members filed out for recess, Patel's chief of staff rushed to his side, whispering urgently in his ear. The color that had drained from the director's face during Ramirez's assault showed no signs of returning. His hands trembled slightly as he reached for his water glass. The confident prosecutor replaced by a man who looked like he'd just witnessed his own execution. Within 17 minutes, the first clips hit Twitter. Kash Patel, exposed, began trending, followed rapidly by Ramirez destroyed and 7-day trap. The footage of Patel's speechless moment, 12 seconds of dead silence, while Ramirez waited for an answer that never came, was shared 2.3 million times in the first hour alone. In the press gallery, veteran reporters who had covered congressional hearings for decades were furiously typing, knowing they had just witnessed something unprecedented. "I've never seen a federal agency head so thoroughly dismantled," whispered CNN's congressional correspondent to her producer. She didn't just win that exchange, she destroyed him with his own tactics. Fox News found themselves in the impossible position of defending the indefensible. Their evening coverage would focus on Ramirez's aggressive tone, rather than her devastating facts, but even their most loyal viewers could see the truth in Patel's blank stare. Behind closed doors, Republican leadership was in crisis mode. House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy called an emergency meeting, his face grim as he watched the footage replay on multiple screens. "How did we not know about the Heritage Foundation payments?" he demanded. "How did we not know about the 17 Anti-Deficiency Act violations?" The answer was simple. They had known. They just hadn't expected anyone to care enough to connect the dots with such surgical precision. At 4:23 p.m., as news of the hearing spread, Senator Elizabeth Warren took to the Senate floor with a prepared statement. "What we witnessed today wasn't just congressional oversight," she declared. "It was a masterclass in constitutional accountability." Representative Ramirez proved that no one, not even an FBI director, is above the law. But the real earthquake came at 6:47 p.m., when former FBI Director James Comey released a statement that sent shockwaves through law enforcement circles. Director Patel's actions, as outlined by Representative Ramirez today, represent a fundamental betrayal of FBI independence and constitutional principles. The Bureau deserves better leadership. By evening, 3 more former FBI directors had issued similar statements. The intelligence community, already wary of Patel's politicization of the Bureau, began openly discussing the need for new leadership. The Heritage Foundation, desperate to distance themselves from the growing scandal, issued a terse statement, claiming their payments to Patel were for general policy discussions, unrelated to FBI operations. But the damage was done. Internal emails, soon to be leaked, would show detailed coordination between Heritage analysts and Patel's office on surveillance priorities. At 9:15 p.m., in a desperate attempt to regain control, Patel's communications team arranged an interview with a friendly podcast host. But even there, surrounded by supportive questions, Patel looked defeated. When asked about the $3.6 million transfer, he could only repeat, "We followed all applicable guidelines," a phrase that had become his political death rattle. The next morning brought worse news. The Washington Post, working overnight with sources energized by Ramirez's performance, published a devastating exposé titled "The Heritage FBI Pipeline: How a Think Tank Shaped Surveillance Policy." The article detailed Not just the $47,000 in speaking fees, but a complex web of coordination that made Patel look less like an FBI director and more like a Heritage Foundation employee with a government badge. More damaging still was the revelation that Ramirez's organization had filed a formal complaint with the Inspector General 3 months earlier, detailing every violation she had outlined in her questioning. The IG had buried the complaint until now. By noon, Patel resign was trending nationally. Protesters gathered outside FBI headquarters, many carrying signs reading "Constitution over Corruption." And Ramirez was right. The optics were devastating. The nation's top law enforcement officer being protested by Americans demanding constitutional compliance. At 2:07 p.m., exactly 24 hours after his humiliation began, Patel submitted his resignation letter to the president. It was a brief, bitter document that blamed partisan witch hunts and political interference for his departure. He mentioned neither the Constitution nor the 17 violations Ramirez had exposed. Delia Ramirez, meanwhile, found herself transformed overnight, from a relatively unknown freshman representative to a national symbol of principled resistance. Speaking requests poured in from universities, law schools, and civic organizations. Late-night hosts fought to book her for interviews, but when reporters asked about her sudden fame, Ramirez remained focused on the constitutional principles that had guided her questioning. "This was never about politics," she said at a press conference outside the Capitol. "This was about the rule of law. When government officials violate their oaths, Congress has a duty to hold them accountable. That's not partisan. That's constitutional." The trap Kash Patel had set, designed to destroy a critic and protect his empire, had become the mechanism of his own destruction. In trying to outsmart Ramirez, he had underestimated the power of truth, preparation, and constitutional principles. The hunter had indeed become the hunted, and the Constitution had won.